Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Kill the Clock podcast. My name's Jeff Proto. I'm here with Ravneet Singh, and today we're going to be going over the Denver Nuggets and the Philadelphia 76ers off seasons, where they were last year, as well as where they are going this upcoming season. How you doing, Rav?
And good to be on again.
Definitely. All right, so to start, we're going to start with the Denver Nuggets. Last year, they were 23rd in the NBA with a final record of 33-49. The Nuggets over the past few seasons have been growing through the draft for the most part. This offseason, they didn't really have any impact signings, and really they're just looking for steady development out of their young guys. What have you thought of their recent draft picks, Rob?
Wait, this year they had one of the best. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to cut you off. Can I redo that?
Yeah. Which part? Just from the beginning, or? Beginning, as I didn't really like the way I opened up either.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we can start from the beginning.
Okay.
All right. Ready?
Yeah.
Hey guys, and welcome to another edition of Kill the Clock podcast. I'm Jeff Purtle here with Ravneet Singh, and we will be talking about the Denver Nuggets today, as well as the Philadelphia 76ers, where they were last year, as well as where they're going this upcoming year. How you doing, Rav?
I'm doing well, man. I'm excited to talk about these two teams. They're both up on the rise, so it should be fun.
Yeah, they're two teams that are coming up in very different ways. To start, we're going to talk about the Denver Nuggets. In the past few years, they've been really growing through the draft, haven't had very many signings, although they were in the discussion with the Dwayne Wade talks before the Chicago Bulls picked them up. For the most part, they're going to be looking to develop their young core with head coach Mike Malone focusing on defensive improvements. What do you think of their core so far?
I like it. I think one thing that seemed lacking at first is the lack of, because they haven't been drafting very high. They've been drafting in the mid-lottery section of the draft. So overall, I think they draft well. I thought they had one of the better drafts of any team in the league. I really liked Malik Beasley. I thought he was underrated, and they got him at a really good spot. Before that, they drafted Juan Hernan-Gomez, who is a modern stretch four. He's going to fit well next to their big centers that they have. And then with the 7th pick, I believe, did Jamal Murray, which I was also a big fan of. But none of these players are perfect. They all have pros and cons to them. But what did you think about their draft? I thought they did pretty well for themselves.
I agree. I think it's extremely hard, as you briefly mentioned, to draft in the mid-lottery area and steadily improve and consistently hit on guys in that area. When you're earlier in the draft, you can kind of have a more clear-cut answer on the guys you're picking. Everyone knew this year that Ben Simmons was going to go first overall. Last year, there was a lot of debate, but the top three were pretty much certain. And picking later on, as a Sacramento Kings fan especially, I'm sure you know, it can be very difficult to hit on these guys. And the Nuggets seem to do a pretty good job. Obviously, we don't know for sure with the 2016 draft, but in the years past, they've seemed to find guys like Gary Harris, Yusuf Nurkic, and later on, Nikolai Jokic, as well as Mudiay last year, and with the 7th pick, to really add to a young core without having to be the worst team in the league or the top few picks. And so that's something that is very difficult, and they seem to do a great job with. And I think a lot of that is attributed to their excellent international scouting.
Yeah, I think they have really good international scouts. I was actually talking to one scout during Summer League. He said that they saw Hernan-Gomez on video, and they didn't really like what they saw. But the moment he came to work out for them, he was just the guy and that he misjudged him. So Hernan Gomez, I think he looked pretty good in summer league too. I mean, you probably saw him there, and I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on his summer league play?
I was very impressed with him. I think that he is going to be an excellent stretch four, ideally in the NBA. And I could definitely see where watching the film of his game, it doesn't really translate the way that he does in real life, because he's a very unique athlete. He's extremely slender for his being a 6'9" frame, but he's extremely long too. They don't have an exact wingspan available, but according to Drafted Express, they estimate that he's around a 7-foot wingspan. And being 6'9" with that 7-foot wingspan, he has extreme quickness, although he lacks strength. And seeing it on tape, as well as he's got very interesting shot mechanics. He has a set shot that kind of it looks a little janky on film, but he does hit it very effectively. He shot 36% in the ACB league, which is one of the most competitive professional leagues in the world. And to see it on tape and to see him succeed in person, it definitely is a different viewing point for a guy like him.
Yeah, I think I remember him, the Nuggets playing the Suns in the summer league, and he's on to Ulis, I believe, and was able to guard him pretty well and stuck with him. And that play alone kind of surprised me about his lateral quickness, and the shooting. Why they drafted him, or they went after Malik Beasley, and I think he's going to be a good fit next to Jokic, and I think that's probably why they got him. I mean, the shooting is something they're missing out of the power forward position. Kenneth Faried can't really spread the floor that well, so I like the pick. I mean, really like Malik Beasley. I know he has some injury issues, and people are scared that he might. I think that's probably one of the reasons why he fell. But at the same time, has a good amount of young guards now with Gary Harris, Moutier, Jamal Murray. Anything you get out of Beasley is a plus at this point, and I think you're going to get a good shooter and a good defender, who's a little bit undersized at the two. But I'm really high on Malik Beasley. I thought he should have gotten higher.
Yeah, I thought that it was interesting where Malik went. I mean, he is 6'5" with a 6'7" wingspan. His size kind of hurts his defensive potential, and he gambles too often on the steal, and there are injury concerns, but he's still a very, very talented basketball player. He's got a great shot. He's got an awesome first step, and he can play above the rim in the half court and in transition. So I think that he's going to be able to contribute at an NBA level, and if he stays healthy, of course. And I think that where they got him, it was a bit of a steal. But back to Juan Hernan Gomez, I really, really liked him in the summer league with the lateral quickness that you mentioned. And another thing that's very underrated about him is because of his length, even though there are going to be guys that maybe blow by him because they're stronger than him or have a quicker first step on the face-up, he is going to be able to recover because he has that 7-foot wingspan. He's 6'9", and when he's playing stretch fours, attacking him on the closeout, even though he might be a step behind, he's going to trail them and be able to effectively potentially alter the shot on the drive to the rim.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm pretty high on him as well. During the summer league, looked really good at times and then really bad. And I think part of the reason why because they made him play point guard, and I think they just wanted to see kind of how he did in handling the ball. What did you think about his summer league play?
So, you're referring to Juan Hernan Gomez, right?
Jamal Murray.
Oh, Jamal Murray. I apologize. So Jamal Murray, I think is interesting. He's one of the most interesting prospects in the summer league because of his limiting size, but because of just how well he shoots the ball. I mean, he scored 20 points per game, shooting 40% from the three at 18 years old for Kentucky this past season. but he is still 6'4" with a 6'6.5" wingspan, and honestly below average athleticism. So there's certainly a lot of strengths that he has and a lot of cons. He kind of has tunnel vision when he is ball dominant for scoring, which isn't necessarily a bad thing right off the get-go. He scores or finds scoring opportunities for himself extremely well. And he did show the potential to possibly create for other people. He passes well with both hands, and he does use the screen extremely well, particularly to find looks for himself, way ahead of people coming into the leagues usually for his age. So he kind of left a few questions to be answered still, but showed a lot more promise than I was expecting.
Yeah, on offense, he looked okay for the most part. I mean, I'm just more worried about his defense now than anything else because he looked kind of lost at times, and he also just couldn't keep up with some of the other guys that he was guarding. So I'm a little bit more worried about his defense than I was initially coming out of college, which I mean, a good defender coming into the league, but just be an average defender. And I still think he can be, but he doesn't really have the tools to be an elite defender.
No, he certainly doesn't, and he gets caught on screens and gambles in passing lanes, which, given his lack of athletic ability and length, he is going to be punished for in the NBA. So I think that that's going to be concerning for his rookie year, but I think for the most part, they're going to be expecting offense when he's in the game. One other thing that is a little bit concerning is the fact that because they have Gary Harris and Will Barton, I don't really know how many shooting guard minutes that they're going to have open for Jamal. Obviously, he'll play some, but that is kind of his more traditional role. And with Emmanuel Mudiay and Jameer Nelson being the other 2 point guards, I think he'll be thrown in that point guard role. And he's not a prototypical point guard. I think it'll be very interesting and a slightly tough transition for him to look for creating for other teammates, but I don't think that it's a task that he can't develop. When we looked at Devin Booker transition last year, he wasn't known for creating for others. He was known more as a knockdown shooter in college. And by the end of the season, he had really developed that aspect of the game. So there's potential. I just haven't seen it yet. You there?
Oh yeah, you cut. Oh, What did you say anything after potential?
There's potential. I just haven't seen it yet.
Okay. Let me.
I think that just cut off. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thing that you pointed out that was interesting to me was that guards on this team, now especially after they drafted 2. Looks like Gary Harris might be the odd man out, just because he's been there already 2 years, and I think last year he improved. He looked a lot better than his rookie year, but I think that he could and then eventually get traded because I think they like Will Barton. Malone speaks highly of him and just says that he works his butt off. So like Barton, especially coming off the bench, does play reckless at times, but he is fun to watch. I just think that what you said about Jamal Murray being a point guard, or them trying to play him at point guard, he's really capable of doing that for long stretches in the game. I think you could run him in the pick and roll a little bit. Jameer is going to have to take most of that backup point guard role, and they're going to have to find for Jamal.
Yeah, and I think that that's going to be a struggle unless they do move Gary Harris, and it doesn't seem like there's much of an indication that or any traction has been noticed, at least by anyone that I've seen, that they're looking to move Gary Harris. But if that isn't the case, it just might be one of those situations where they carve out a little bit of minutes at the shooting guard, a few minutes at the point guard, and reduce the minutes for Gary Harris. The only thing about that is coming into the third season, you kind of want him to be comfortable in his role and not worry about the minutes, competing for the minutes with a rookie and kind of worrying about where he is in his role in the season. I think that Mike Malone is very good at managing egos and kind of getting people to buy in. He was the only coach that I've ever seen DeMarcus commit to. And
Yes.
I think that especially in Denver with this young core, he's going to be able to get people to buy in and take fewer minutes. But it'll be very interesting to see with as many young guards that they have, how they can figure out a way to find the space and time to play them all.
Do you think they could play Malik Beasley at the 3 for maybe 10 minutes a game? I mean, down the line, his rookie year is probably not going to play that much, especially coming off of an injury. But I mean, down the line, do you think he could play some minutes at the 3?
I think it'll be really tough. I think it'll be situational, maybe small ball threes at best. But I mean, being 6'5" with a 6'7" wingspan, he is a very, very solid athlete, but it's extremely concerning to think about how he would guard any threes and test it from time to time simply because there is maybe a little bit more room for minutes there. But even now with Danilo Gallinari and then Wilson Chandler coming back into the lineup, that position even is congested. All around, this team is very deep in a very unique way. They've got young guys all competing for minutes at virtually every spot.
And thing before we move on to the power or their big guys is I want to talk about Mudiay because I really liked him coming out of China. I wanted him to go to SMU. That didn't happen. Because he went to China, I didn't see him play as much, and I wanted the Kings to take him. Actually, I think we had the sixth pick or something like that, and the Kings took Stein. But is this that Emmanuel Mudiay he can't really shoot, and he improved shooting throughout the year, but I'm still worried about his shooting.
Yeah, it's certainly a reasonable concern. I mean, his stroke started to look better towards the end of the year, but it definitely is something that you want to see more consistent than 2 months of play. I mean, in March, from the three-point line, he shot 38%, and in April he shot 35%, but those were very, very different from the previous few months. I mean, February he shot 28%, January 33%, and then December 20%. So there was certainly growth, and that's all you can hope for, but I would like to see closer to the 35% that he shot in April for a full season before I'm sold on it being a consistent facet of his game. But hopefully it can be developed. I mean, in those April and March months, March he averaged 15.8 points per game. April he averaged 18.8. And if he can develop that shot, it's just going to open up for his strengths, which are cutting to the basket and playmaking through driving to the basket. So I think that it's a good sign, especially considering how young he is. I mean, he's only 20 years old, and he's already developing through the first NBA season noticeably in his shooting stroke. So the development aspect, it seems like it's there. And going forward, if he can develop that permanently, he's going to be a very scary player because he is a strong cutter and an excellent passer, has solid court vision, and I'm excited to see him too. He was one of my favorite prospects in that draft, and it was a very, very strong draft as well. So I'll be interested to see how he develops from here on out.
Yeah, because it was such a strong draft, maybe I didn't find his rookie year that exciting. But at the same time, he did make those improvements. That being said, he struggled scoring at the basket and finishing. So his playmaking was okay. Turnovers. He struggles shooting from outside. So I'm a little bit worried about him, and I'm not as high on him as maybe you are, or maybe as high as I used to be. I just don't know. I'm a little bit worried. I don't know if he could. I think he could be a starter in the league, but I think he might be a low end starter for me.
I think that a low end starter for me, at least the way I see him, I think low end starter is kind of where I see his floor. I think that he's got solid potential, especially with the way his shooting and scoring developed through the season. And I mean, of course, March and April are small sample sizes, but he was consistent. I mean, if you going through the game logs, there are very few games where he was in single digits. I can see 3 in the month of March, and in April there was not a single game that he scored in single digits. And I think that that's going to grow from here. And with shooters around him, particularly guys like Jamal Murray and Danilo Gallinari, Wilson Chandler's coming back to shoot, I think the spacing is going to help him a lot and allow him to showcase his ability to make plays and pass the ball.
Yeah, I mean, if anytime you put a rookie in as a starting point guard, he's going to struggle, and I think that's what he did initially, and he looked better throughout the year. So maybe I'm a little bit too harsh on him, but let's see. I mean, I was going to ask you this: which, if you had to pick which one player from this roster who you could start a franchise with, who would it be?
If I could pick one player to start, that is a tough one. I would. Are we assuming where they are right now, like their age, or at the beginning of their careers? Because
At their age right now.
okay, so at their age right now, let's see. That is really tough. I'd probably go with Moutier. I really like him as a player. I'm higher on him than a lot of people, and because I've seen the way he's played, he's a little bit more of a known commodity than the other rookies that they drafted this year. I don't want to say anyone like, Juan Hernan Gomez or Jamal Murray before I see, what they produce, and it's tough not to pick Jokic or Nurkic, but to me, in this league, you need a strong point guard, and Moutier showed really promising signs to develop his major weakness, which is shooting. And he's only 20 years old. He's got athleticism you can't teach, and there are a lot of positive indications that he can develop further throughout his career. So right now, I definitely say it's Emmanuel Moutier for me. How about you? Who are you thinking?
He would probably pick Nikola Jokic. I'm just really impressed with what he's done in the Olympics and through parts of last year. He was pretty inconsistent, and I think that's mostly due to his minutes that he was getting. I think he's an excellent post player. He's already one of the better post. I think he's an amazing passer for his size. His defense is concerning, but if I had to pick one, it would probably be him. Then maybe Moutier, but it's pretty close between him and Murray actually for me.
Yeah, I definitely don't think that Jokic is a bad answer. He's the other guy that I was considering when you asked. I mean, he averaged 10 points, 7 boards, 2.5 assists, and a steal on 51% shooting in 21 minutes last year. Those are insanely efficient numbers. I mean, advanced stats love him. He has a solid shooting stroke with room for growth and room to grow to the three-point line. From the free throw line, he shot 81%, and from three, he shot 33%, shooting a little more than 1 3-point attempt per game. So there's definitely a lot to love about him. And defensively, I mean, he steals the ball, he blocks the ball. He's a solid rim protector and post defender. He's a little slow on the perimeter and face-up game, but he is also a hard worker. Recently on the low post, Mike Malone was a guest, and he mentioned how dedicated he is to developing. He's always in the gym posting workout videos on his Twitter account and just really, really work ethic that you want in a young guy. So I think that's not a bad answer, and he would be my second answer to Moutier, and I'm very interested to see how he grows from here. He definitely has produced extremely well in the Olympics, but to be honest, his stats have been strikingly similar in the Olympics to his first NBA season, to last NBA season. He averaged 9.2 points per game, 6 boards, and 3.5 assists on 55% shooting in very similar minutes. I believe 22 minutes per game. So I think that he's a very solid pick. He has a solid, high basketball IQ and is an excellent passer, like you said, with only room to grow. But it'll be interesting to see how he develops further with an increased minute and heavier workload this coming season.
Yeah, I watched. I was watching a little bit of the Serbia versus China game, and there was a play where I don't remember it might have been Bogdan who was cutting and was posting up, and he threw this nice bounce pass behind his back while he was posting up, and it was just like, oh my God, that just reminds me of Chris Webber back in the heyday. Like, this guy has unbelievable vision. He does need to get a lot stronger. He gets boxed out easily. So I could see rebounding being an issue for him. But I just love his upside and him. And I think he's the brightest spot for that team. And it's funny because he got picked, I think 41st or something. It was something in the 40s where he got drafted.
Mm-hmm.
I just think like this guy could player. It wouldn't shock anyone, I think, at this point.
Yeah, he got drafted 41st in the 2014 draft, and I think a big part of that is because he didn't come over right away. He spent the 2014-15 season with Mega Leaks in Serbia, and last year he showed that he was very much worth the wait, especially considering Nurkic was out for the first 2 months with an injury. He had a partially torn left patellar tendon, which held him out for the first 2 months. He came in, and Joffrey Laverne originally played a lot of those minutes, and Jokic showed that he was someone that very much deserved to be in there for them. So I'm excited to see where he goes from here. I think it's going to be very interesting how they're going to be able to fit minutes for Jokic and Nurkic side by side. They did it for a little bit last season, towards the end of the season, just playing around with it. And I think it worked a little better than to be expected, especially with the small ball trend that's been occurring in the NBA. But it's going to be interesting to see if it's remotely possible to play them together in long stints of time, because those two are certainly traditional centers. Nurkic being 7 feet tall, Jokic being 6'10". And I mean, Nurkic has quick feet, but not laterally guarding like towards the perimeter. And I think it'll be interesting to see how they shell out the minutes and where they shell out the minutes positionally for those two.
Yeah, I think it's going to depend on the matchup. Because you're just not going to be able to do that. And I don't think you could play that much against the Warriors. And maybe even Nurkic, I think it's best to go small, and those guys aren't going to be able to guard the pick and roll that well.
No,
I don't think you could play them together that often. Zach Lowe asked Mike Malone on his podcast about that, and he pretty much said that it's going to depend on the matchup. And I don't know if we're going to see it too often in this day and age. But at the same time, who doesn't really space the floor. I wonder how he's going to work with Nurkic and Jokic as well. I actually think that I wouldn't be surprised if they wanted to trade Fareed, because they have a lot of these other young guys and down to have a good year this year and eventually demand that a big contract. They have a really good flexibility in the next few years, so that's not an issue with them anyways. But I just think Fareed's time in Denver seems like it's coming to an end for some reason, but I could be wrong on that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely could see where that would be the case. He's interesting because he's a high energy guy. He's going to contribute and hustle and play extremely hard every single night, but you haven't seen a lot of growth or development in his game. You kind of know what you're going to get when Fareed plays. I mean, over the past 3 seasons, he's played 25 to 28 minutes, and he's virtually had identical stats. It's almost staggering how similar they are. He's gone from 13.7 points per game in the 2013-14 season to 12.6 points per game in the 14-15 season and 12.5 points per game in the 15-16 season on 54, 50, and 55% shooting. He's averaged 8.6, 8.9, and 8.7 season or rebounds per game in those seasons respectively. And so I think it's a little bit concerning, the lack of development in the game, but he's still certainly an excellent contributor for any team, and he's on a very valuable contract. So I think that that's certainly beneficial. I mean, he, especially with the way the CBA is going, he is currently making $12 million for this upcoming season, and he's locked in through the 2019 offseason on that with ascending 4.5% raises. So he's making $12 million this year, 12.9 the following, and 13.7 in his final season of the contract, 2018-19. So he's certainly a movable piece. I'm just interested in who would trade for him and what kind of return they would get and what kind of return they would be looking for, considering they have so many log jams at the positions that they currently have.
Yeah, that's a good point. The thing is, Fareed doesn't really, he's a good energy guy, he's a good rebounder, but he's not a rim protector, and he doesn't spread the floor. And if you can't protect the rim or spread the floor, value automatically goes down. I think when he was with he was getting coached by George Karl, and in his first few years he looked great and he looked like a steal. Changed since then, and he doesn't protect the rim or spread the floor, so I think his value automatically goes down. I don't really know which teams would want to trade for him because of that. And I do think he's still valuable. I just think he's a bench player to me because he doesn't do those things. And at the same time, you want to try to play maybe small and put Gallo or Wilson Chandler at the 4 at times and see how that goes as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that in international play, Gallo typically plays the 4, and with Wilson Chandler coming back, they're going to want to spread that a little bit and allow him to play that position a little more, and that just adds so much to the spacing and work that Mudiay can do and operate in the pick and roll. So
you cut out actually.
Oh, I did? Where did I cut out?
Now, sometime during that.
Okay, I'll just redo it all.
Okay.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that they're going to want to play either Gallinari or Wilson Chandler a little bit at the 3 and 4. Gallo certainly plays at the 4 in international play a little more than he does the 3. And having a lineup out there like that allows for a lot more shooting than any lineup really that Kenneth Faried can offer, which gives Mudiay more room to operate in the pick and roll. And I honestly think with the way small ball has just taken over the NBA this past season, and it appears will continue to take over this upcoming one, that lineup is going to be a little bit more in line with the teams that they're going to be facing and the matchups that they're going to be facing for a majority of the time.
Yeah, I agree. And I just wonder how many minutes. There's not that many minutes. You only have so many minutes, right? And if you're going to play Gallo or Wilson at the 4 for parts of the game, and then you want to try to develop Hernan Gomez. I just wonder how much time there is left for Farid, but he's still guy. Let's see. I also thought it was curious in the offseason how they got D Wade's attention and how like it. I wasn't sure if it was just a technique to kind of get Miami to be more serious about re-signing him, but it seems like he was serious about leaving and that he was really considering Denver.
Yeah, I think that was really interesting. When I first heard it, the immediate thought that I think came to everyone's head was, oh, Dwayne Wade's using it for leverage again. Like, that's what he does in the offseason. And then it kind of became a little more serious, and the Bulls kind of stole that thunder and obviously signed him later. He's got the hometown connection, and it'd be hard to compete with that being Denver. But the fact that they got Dwayne Wade's attention, I think, is a good sign for all seasons to come. And with the developing young core, I think that there's going to be a little bit more interest drawn. It seems like a great city. I've never been, but the players that are there seem to really enjoy being there. And I think that in all seasons to come, the fact that Dwayne Wade took a look at it is a good indication of where they're going to be in future seasons.
I agree. And it's kind of interesting because this team is really young. I think they were one of the first team to beat the Warriors this past year, and but how many games are they going to win next year? I think they're going to improve. But where do you see them finishing among the Western Conference next year?
So that is one thing that I've honestly been struggling with, because they're extremely well coached and they've got a lot of young talent, but I don't see them in the playoffs because of how competitive it is. But I think they'll probably be better than, let's see. I see them finishing in probably the 12th in the West kind of range. That's kind of where I'm seeing them. I think that it's hard to say that they're better than the Pelicans because they still got Anthony Davis, and we don't really know what their team looks like because they were so injury-riddled last year. It seems like they're injury-ridden every single year. And Minnesota grew last year. That was one of the teams, or is going to grow this upcoming year, with Tom Thibodeau coming and the addition of Chris Dunn. And that was one of the teams that they were ahead of in the standings this past season. I think that they're going to remain better than the Phoenix Suns. I think that they're right there with the Lakers. Probably, they're looking at the young talent that they have. I think that they probably are better than the Lakers currently. And I think that they might, but they might be better than the Kings. But other than that, I don't really see who else in the West that they could beat out in the standings. So I think that right around the 12 range is a pretty good spot to expect them to be, especially because they're really focused on buckling down defensively and growing as a cohesive unit, finding what players should be playing at which positions and figuring out what their future is going to look like more than actually trying to really win now.
Yeah, this team won 33 games last year, and that's the crazy thing. I think they overachieved last year, and all their guys developed and are going to get better. So they should win more games. It's just that the West is so competitive, and everyone also seems like they got better. Like even the worst teams seem like they got better. Even the Lakers, even the Suns, and the T-Wolves also are kind of in a similar situation where the Nuggets are, and they just their young guys are going to experience now. So I'm kind of with you in that range. As me if they were the second worst team in the West, and it wouldn't surprise me if they just missed out on the playoffs and were like the 10th or 11th best team in the West. It's just I'm not really sure where to put this team. If you ask me right now, I'm probably going to tell you that Suns more, and I like the T-Wolves more, um, the Pelicans more, and that's the kind of like disappointing thing is that I think this team is really good and well coached. I'm a huge Mike Malone fan. I think what happened in Sacramento was unfortunate for him, and I think the Kings are kind of regretting it. If so. I'm not really sure. I would probably put if a bullet to my head, I'm probably putting them second to worst in the West, and that's crazy because I've been speaking so highly about this team.
Yeah, and I don't think that that's unrealistic either. It's really tough to say. Like you said, so many of these teams seem to have grown this past off season, and like we mentioned, we don't know what the Pelicans are going to be. It's hard to say that they're going to be worse or in a position that they were in like this past season, especially with a franchise player like Anthony Davis. So going forward, I think that it wouldn't be unreasonable to say that the Nuggets you can expect to be the second worst in the West. I wouldn't like you said, wouldn't be surprised if they're in that kind of 10 to 12 range either. But they might have overachieved with the 33-49. But I think that they certainly showed they had more talent than anyone was expecting coming into last year. And now I don't know how they're going to be able to showcase all their talent with the limited minutes that they're going to have for so many guys in several different positions. So it'll be interesting to see. I think that there's going to be a lot of tinkering with lineups. Mike Malone's not going to settle on anything all year long, I don't think. And come season end, I wouldn't be surprised if this is a different team or looks a little different from maybe a trade or something along those lines.
Yeah, they have a lot of assets. They have a lot of guys who could play now, and they have a lot of guys who are young and haven't been fully developed. And you could definitely see a potential trade. Right now in the NBA, it's a buyer's market, and a lot of these teams that we have talked about the games. It seems like everyone wants to win games, and that the tanking strategy is getting less used, it seems. So the Nuggets are one of those teams that they don't want to tank and they want to win. I expect them to win about 30 to 30. I don't know. I expect them to win about 30 games plus or minus 3 or 4.
Sure, I don't think that's too unrealistic. And with those standing predictions said for the Denver Nuggets, I think it's a good time to transition to the Philadelphia 76ers, who, although they have been obviously growing through the draft over the past couple seasons, including this one, they were much more aggressive this past offseason in the free agency. They finally signed a couple of guys, went after a few restricted free agents, and although they didn't come up with the restricted free agents, were able to really add to their roster through free agency for the first time in years, which Sixer fans I know are ecstatic about, and I'm excited to see as well.
Yeah, Philly is a very interesting team to me, and they kind of have a similar problem to the Nuggets in that they have a lot of these big guys and not enough minutes. And so there's rumors. I think they've straight up said it that Simmons is going to have some time at the point guard position. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a smart move because of the lack of good point guards they have on this team. And because of Simmons' passing abilities, and you and I saw his some of his summer league games. He just put on a show some games, and his shooting even looked a little bit improved. Do you think about the Sixers putting him at the point guard position?
Oh, I think that right now for the offensive side of things, that's the only place that he can play. I mean, to me, I didn't think that his shooting was really, like, he didn't impress me shooting in the summer league. Last year, he was 14 for 45 on jump shots. He scored 7 points on 10 catch and shoots, and he shot 1 for 3 on threes, which 1 for 3 doesn't sound good, but it's 3 shots. Like only 3. And I mean, watching him in shoot around, I saw him airball several shots. Obviously, it's shoot around. He's not really, putting his all into it, but he should be, because he can't shoot, like, in my mind, at all right now. So right now, I think that you almost have to play him like a point guard offensively, especially because he can create as well as anybody on that team. And that's really saying something now, considering they have TJ McConnell, who's excellent at creating for people around him, as well as Sergio Rodriguez, who's coming over. And he is, in addition to kind of similar to TJ McConnell, a pick and roll maestro, really flashy passer, and has great court vision. But Ben Simmons, he passes the ball like no big that we have really seen in this generation. I think that he's going to be an exceptionally.
You cut out after or something. I think you're talking about TJ McConnell.
Okay, I'll just say the whole creator thing.
But yeah, for sure.
I honestly think that Ben Simmons is the best creator on the team, and that's really saying something, considering they have TJ McConnell, who's made a career out of creating for his teammates, as well as they brought over Sergio Rodriguez from Spain, who is a pick and roll maestro, a very, very strong passer, excellent court vision. And Ben Simmons still might be the best passer, I think is the best passer on this team. I mean, we saw him toss passes effortlessly that no one else saw until he actually did it. I mean, this guy has vision like no big man that we've seen in a very, very long time, and I can't wait to see the way he creates for his teammates around him, especially now that they have a few more shooters, adding Jared Bayless as well as having Robert Covington. I think he's going to find them both. And with big men who can finish inside like Big Ja and hopefully, health permitting, Joel Embiid, it's going to be very interesting to see the way he dishes the rock. I mean, if he doesn't dish and play the point guard position, I don't know how any defensive team is going to really take him seriously and guard him. I think they're going to sag off way too much, and it's going to be inefficient offense, which is the last thing the Sixers need or want. So I think that that's really the only position offensively that he can play right now.
Yeah, it seems like it, because Okafor is going to spend most of his time in the post, and you're going to want Embiid to spend most of his time in the post when he's healthy. Which by the way, he seems like he's on the right track. His workout videos with Drew Hanlon have been really impressive. Footwork is sublime. I'm just very impressed with his play. I just, fingers crossed. Let's hope that he's healthy and that we could finally see him in the NBA game. He's not going to play that much. That being said, Noel, Okafor, and Saric, none of them can really spread the floor all that well. Though Saric has improved his shooting a lot in the last 2 years. When he got drafted, he was known as a non-shooter, but he's become one of the better shooters on his team, I believe. You can't really. It seems like you're going to struggle putting Simmons at the power forward. I mean, he's not bad posting up. He kind of has this awkward footwork that reminds me of Blake Griffin, where he's relying more on his athleticism more than his footwork. So I think putting him at the point guard position makes a lot of sense right now.
Yeah, certainly, especially like we've talked about, they have so many big men currently, and by allowing him to play point guard on defense, he can try to pick up one of the forwards, do his best on that, and on offense just create for his teammates, and hopefully be out there with guys like Nerlens Noel and Big Ja and Joel Embiid. Hopefully, Joel Embiid, I am the most excited for. If he's healthy this season, I don't know how I'll miss like a single Sixer game because he intrigues me more than any prospect in the past few years. He's got a ceiling that I don't think very few prospects have. He at 7 feet tall, 7'5", with his agility and footwork and coordination for a big man and ability to run the floor. I mean, he seems like he has it all when healthy. And he went third in his draft behind Andrew Wiggins and Jabari Parker. But before he got hurt, I honestly thought that he should have been drafted first. Like, he impressed me like no one else has in a very long time.
Yeah, and just his footwork is just amazing at his age, and he hasn't even been playing basketball all that long. So I'm definitely excited to see him play. I think he'll be on a minutes restriction start of the season, but hopefully near the end he could start to play 20 to 30 minutes a game, and that I'll be really excited to see. So let's just assume that Simmons are your front court players of the future. Is that crazy to assume? Or, I mean, do you think that it's going to be some other two guys?
I don't think it's crazy to assume. I think that I don't think that they'll commit to Embiid and Simmons being the future until Embiid can successfully have a heavy workload throughout a full season. And that's concerning because they have Nerlens Noel, who's going to need to be extended pretty shortly, and Big Ja, both of whom are extremely talented and unique players. And I think that they're going to need to figure out a solution in either this season or the following one for moving them. And they're going to want a decent return because they're both extremely talented. I mean, they could extend them. They probably will just extend them and wait until they have a more concrete answer on Embiid's future. But I don't think that you can really count on him until that full season with a heavy workload is played out, even though I want so badly to believe that he is their big man of the future.
I do too. So I just want to assume he is healthy and that Simmons is their pseudo point guard but is playing the 4, where I think he would be better fitted just because I would be worried about his defense guarding some point guards just because of his lack of effort more than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
In that scenario, no seem like the odd guys out. And I do think that there've already been rumors about them trying to deal them, and they were trying to trade them for Boston's pick this year, but Boston wasn't interested, it seems like. So do you think they're going to try to trade those guys if they could figure out if Embiid is going to be healthy for the upcoming future?
So I don't think that it's out of the question. I think it's probably going to happen that in the next 2 seasons, they will move at least one of those two, either Big Ja or Nerlens Noel. But they're not going to move them for nothing because they are extremely valuable players and they add a lot to any team that they're going to. I mean, Jahlil Okafor's offensive game is unbelievable. He was extremely overshadowed by Karl Anthony Towns having one of the best, if not the best, rookie season since LeBron James. But I think that they're going to really need to get some return on both those assets because just giving them up, especially considering they're each restricted free agents and they've got so much cap space available, that they're not going to just bite on the first trade offer. They're not going to rush a trade like Sam Hinkie did with the Harden thing with the Harden trade because they were in a luxury tax situation, and it's a very different situation where the Sixers have more money than they know what to do with. So they have a lot of time before they really have to figure it out, short of one of those guys becoming noticeably unhappy. But I think that at some point in the near future, and when I say near, the next probably 2, maybe 3 years, they're going to trade one of them at least, possibly 2, depending on how the Joel Embiid and Simmons combination plays out. And they're going to be looking to develop in the point guard and shooting guard area, I think, and hopefully re-sign Bob Covington, because he's got one more year and he's looked great for them so far.
Yeah, so of the 5 guys, of the young guys that they drafted, the big men, Embiid, Noel, Sarge, Okafor, and Simmons, I would want is Simmons and Embiid. And I also think that Okafor and Noel are good players, but Okafor can't play defense. He struggles defensively in the pick and roll, and he's not much of a rim protector. But he is a big body down low, and Noel has a shot blocking ability, but his post defense could improve some, and he's limited on offense. The 2 guys that I could see getting traded in 2 years, next year. The thing is, how the longer you keep them, the more likely they are to get, and that they're not getting the time that they want to play. And I also think that's just bad for the locker room chemistry, and it also devalues because everyone's getting less minutes. Their stats are going to be lower, and their values are also going to get lower. So in some respect, I kind of think that Philly should almost move quicker than wait it out. But even though that's the safer thing to do.
I think that that's a solid point. I do think that Nerlens Noel's kind of offensive contributions have been a little hindered by the fact that Big Ja is playing the center spot and kind of eating up space in the post. I think it's hard for him to showcase what he can do, because I think he's got solid post moves. Not great, but he's shown the ability to score a little bit in the post. His above the rim game is excellent. He catches lobs extremely well, and transition game, he is going to be a nightmare in years to come for defensive teams. But for the most part, I think that any team that's looking at either Nerlens Noel or Jahlil Okafor kind of know what to expect from the player that they're getting. Big Ja, excellent offense. Nerlens, excellent defense. And even if the minutes aren't there for them because they have those prolific bigs, I mean, Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, it'd be hard to pry minutes from them if you're anybody. I think that because of what Nerlens and Big Ja are so good at and have already shown in their career, even if maybe they don't get the numbers that they were in seasons past, like they have been when they were playing more minutes, I think that the value is going to be there because so long as they're playing efficiently in the minutes that they have. And I think that short of there being a huge chemistry crisis for the locker room, I don't think it'd be good to sell too quickly.
Yeah, I see that for sure. And I don't think they're gonna rush on trading any of them. And having Simmons play point guard kind of helps with that issue, because then it just opens up more minutes for the other guys to play center. But what do you think about the other 2 draft picks that they had this year between Luwawu and Korkmaz? Which one of those guys do you like better?
So Luwawu, coming into the draft, I was very excited about him. I really wanted to see him succeed. He has solid athleticism and NBA length. But when you watched him play in Summer League, he really wasn't as impressive. He was a bit streaky. He's got solid shooting mechanics, but he was inconsistent shooting the ball there, and he really didn't stand out. And as a rookie, that's okay. He's still very young, 21 years old. But I think that I would have liked to see more from him. as a wing guy that I was expecting to be able to shoot a little better. Korkmaz, I think he is one of those guys that, I mean, he's 6'7", 19 years old. He's a draft and stash. He's playing at least one more season in Turkey for Anadolu Efes Sports Club. So I think that he was a solid pickup. I'm just not really sure what to expect from him, or when to expect him in the NBA.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I like Luwawu more. Korkmaz is probably the better shooter, but he's worse on defense. And Luwawu does have good shooting mechanics, and he's improved a good amount over the last year. So I like him better. I thought that was a good pick. I'm not a huge fan of Korkmaz, so of the two, I like Luwawu more.
Certainly, yeah, I do too. And I mean, Luawu's game above the rim is strong. He looks like he's going to get out in transition. And last year, the Sixers were 6th in the NBA in pace, which is the estimate of the number of possessions per 48 minutes for anyone who might not know that. And so I think that game plan, and with the athletes around him and the passing ability of the people around him, it's going to suit him for transition game, but it'll be a necessity in the future for him to be able to shoot on this team.
Definitely. And I think Korkmaz Turkey is good for him and for the team because they signed Gerald Henderson and Jared Bayless that are going to take more time shooting guard position. So Luwawu being their starting small forward of the future, Sen and Bayless take the minutes at the shooting guard position.
Definitely. What do you think of those signings?
I thought they were interesting. I mean, if Sam Hinkie was there, I didn't really see that he would make those moves. They just didn't seem like Hinkie type moves. They seemed more like Jerry Colangelo moves, just like the Ish Smith one, where they're solid NBA guys who are rotation players, but future of the franchise. They're just there to win games and help the team look less embarrassing.
Yeah, I think that those are good points. I really loved the Jared Bayless signing, especially next to Ben Simmons. And the reason for that is he had shooting and playmaking as a guard, which the team desperately needed. They very much lacked any shooting at the point guard position. I think with Ben Simmons with the ball in his hand, he's going to be doing more catching and shooting, which he excelled in last season. And I love him as a three-point shooter. And one thing that is really nice about the fact that he's going to be playing a lot with Ben Simmons is that Bayless is great off the catch and shoot on the right side, and Ben Simmons takes the pick and roll to the left side like very, very frequently. He's ball dominant with his left hand, and he is going to shift the defense to the left side, which is perfect for Jared Bayless, who last season shot 56% from the right corner three, 50% from the right wing, and 44% from the top of the key. And with a guy who has court vision like Ben Simmons, I think that off the pick and pop or pick and roll, he is going to find Bayless so frequently in their offense that I think it's going to be kind of a bread and butter type of play for them. I wouldn't be surprised if Bayless becomes a very key role for their offense alongside Bob Covington, because those two guys are really the only ones that can shoot. And obviously there's going to be a lot of attention on them from the defensive team. But when Ben Simmons is taking on the pick and roll, it's going to be hard to ignore on the left side and not shift left. And so I think it's going to be really beneficial for Bayless. And I thought that was really the best signing that they had this offseason, especially because 3 years, $27 million for a 27-year-old guard who played his best season last season. I thought that was an excellent contract, even though they probably could have overpaid him. given the fact that they have so much cap space, and yet they didn't need to get him to come.
Yeah, I think those were good signings for them to win more games and be more respectable. Um, Seems like the tanking days are over in Philly. Is that how it's feeling for you?
I think that the tanking days are certainly over. I think that the firing of Hinkie was kind of like the turning point. The second Coangelo came in, I think that the um, purposefully tanking days ended, and they're going to be really trying. They got a team of complete NBA athletes, which last season, I mean, their guard and forwards were awful. With the exception, at least until Ish Smith came, their point guard situation was abysmal. And so I think that adding Jared Bayless, having TJ McConnell, adding Sergio Rodriguez allows for a lot more playmaking and creating and shooting. And Gerald Henderson is an awesome athlete. He is growing as a three-point shooter. He's never been a great one, but last year he's steadily improved over every season. And last year he shot 35.4%, taking 2 per game, which really isn't that bad. And it's about as good or better than anyone not named Robert Covington on the Sixers last season. So he does add to that a little bit, and the fact that he's a capable defender is going to be very useful for them in defensive-minded rotations and lineups. I'm sure Brett Brown is ecstatic to finally have a team of NBA players, even though they're still going to very much struggle this season and not really gain too much traction in the standings, but will look a lot better in losing.
Yeah, I agree. I think this team has the capability of winning more games than last year for sure. I could see their best lineup being something like Henderson, Covington, Simmons, and Okafor or Embiid, and that's a lot better than what they had last year. So things are definitely on the upswing for this team. I expect them to finish near the bottom of the league in terms of wins. So they're still going to get a high draft pick, and they have the Lakers pick if the Lakers finish outside of the top 3. I think it's a top 3 protected pick. So they have a lot of good young assets, and they could possibly get 2 top 5 picks this year, which would be another huge building blocks in a deeper draft to build around the already young core that they have now.
Yeah, I think that the struggle of being a Philadelphia 76ers fan is going to really kind of turn tides, which is exciting because they've got a core that's going to be interesting for anyone interested in really good basketball. Ben Simmons, I was looking at their lineup and I was trying to figure out how they would what their starting lineup coming into the season would be. And what I landed on was Ben Simmons as the point guard on offense, kind of grabbing one of the forwards on the defensive end of things, with Jared Bayless and Robert Covington playing like the 2-3 on offense and the 1 and the 2 defensively. And then Nerlens Noel and or probably Ben Simmons. The thing is, they've got so many forwards and bigs. Like, do they sit Nerlens Noel right away, or do they have Ben Simmons come off the bench? Do they have Big Ja start at the center? Or it's just they have so much to play with. It's going to be very interesting to see what Brown comes up with and how the team chemistry is on the court with each other and where they go from here.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting for sure. Before we wrap up, I was just going to ask you, do you think the whole tanking that they did, like, where's your stance on that? Because they probably don't get Simmons without doing that, guys.
No, I don't think that they do get Simmons without doing that. And to be honest, they have a lot of assets. Their future looks bright, and it's been an awful couple of years being a 76ers fan. As a fan, I would not want anything to do with those past 2-3 years. But if it winds up, that they have a young core that they can keep together for years as a result of it, then I'm on board almost. I mean, it might have been the best route to take, but I would not be comfortable. It would sit uneasy with me going into several years of being awful as any team, even though it did pan out for them in this scenario.
Yeah, I mean, um I'm not the biggest fan of it, but it definitely works, and I can't really you can't really blame Hinkie for doing it because it was the best way to build a team from the bottom. This team, the NBA is built on having good stars. You have to have good stars if you want to contend for a championship, and um, some of those guys who could potentially become a star. So it's a struggle to watch in the beginning. Um, I'm a Kings fan, right? And I've seen the Kings not tank and try to make the playoffs and still be really bad, and then end up with a pick where most of the most promising players are already gone at that point. Philly just took the opposite route and they just went straight for the tanking and they got a lot of heat for it. But I think it's going to pay off in the long run for them.
I think so too, and it's kind of interesting when you look at what the Denver Nuggets have been doing and trying to compete over the past few years, while maintain a solid team on the court while also growing, whereas the Sixers have just deliberately been the worst team out that they could put out there, and have been growing through the draft and high draft picks with these assets and seeing kind of where their futures are, because in the short term, I think the Denver Nuggets obviously have the better team, but in the long term, I think that the Sixers' future is much, much brighter, much more clearly bright than the Denver Nuggets. And so it's hard to say, completely honestly, that the tanking method was a bad decision, even though it led to years of awful basketball in the city and, to be honest, miserable team to watch. So it's really tough. I don't think that there is a right decision, and I think that it takes a very, very committed upper management like Hinkie to successfully pull it off. But I think that, like you said, it does work, even though as fans of basketball, no one wants to see it.
Yeah, and we talked about the Nuggets earlier. To draft well, and Philly has to draft well, even though they're picking in the very beginning. If Philly had picked Porzingis instead of Okafor, even brighter, and gets fired, or not fired, but I don't think he leaves. And so it's just kind of interesting. I mean, I don't know which way is the better way to go by building a team, but you have to draft well in no matter which way you choose to build.
Yeah, and I think that both these teams have done it, and despite the fact that the Nuggets have drafted well, the upside is just not quite where I see the Sixers with all their assets and the star potential that they have, even though there's obviously no certainty that their young talent winds up being stars. I just see more of their players having higher upside than anyone on the Denver Nuggets roster. To your question earlier about who I would want to start a franchise with the Denver Nuggets, I would much rather choose from one of these players on the 76ers than anyone on the Nuggets, because they have several, honestly, very good options to start a franchise with, even though we don't know what they're going to turn out to be.
With that, I think you could make the argument for Okafor over anyone on the Nuggets, and Simmons for sure over anyone on the Nuggets. And if Embiid is healthy, then it's also him. So I mean, there's just a lot of talent that this team has, and I think they have a brighter future than the Nuggets, though. I think both teams are going to be good. Eventually, they're going to be playoff teams down the line.
Absolutely. Is there anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I think we pretty much covered the majority of both teams. It should be exciting to see where they finish off in the regular season.
Definitely. All right. Well, in the coming week, expect an episode with Olympic coverage. We're going to try to record that Monday or Tuesday of this next week. And in addition to the Olympic coverage, we'll be talking about the New York Knicks and Phoenix Suns in the next episode of Kill the Clock podcast. Thanks for listening, and talk to you. Can I read you that?
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
And it's at the end, so
What's that?
easy to. It's at the end, so it's easy to
edit.
Take it out. Yeah.
All right, for sure. Let's see. So, all right. So I think that about wraps up everything for this podcast. In the coming week, expect an episode of Kill the Clock with Olympic coverage, as well as talking about the New York Knicks and Phoenix Suns. Thanks for listening, and oh my God. Thanks for listening. That's all. I guess just to edit out after that, and I'll just say, the thanks for listening.
Okay, yeah, maybe just say thanks for listening one more time.
Thanks for listening.
All right, perfect. Let me...